I think it will be a very interesting webinar because, as you know, we just maybe we have to be more careful, but we have experienced an unprecedented situation in the port, and so the title of the webinar is today, Port Management Today, is wow, such a question, because we had to face unprecedented crisis, and it seems that in Europe, it seems that the main wave of the COVID-19 is behind us, even if we have to be careful, and the shock was terrible, and it was terrible dramatic for the ports. It was dramatic for the ports, but we have to have a word and a thought for all the people who have suffered from the COVID-19 disease. So if today, this afternoon, to address this question, the port management, we have four distinguished panelists, and I want to present in a very short presentation this panelist. I would start by the first one, Tor. Tor, who is the CEO, Tor Østervold is the CEO and founder of ECOSubsea, which has developed technologies that keep our vessel oil free of fouling with a robot that send all biofouling closer to be used in biogas production. I am sure that during the presentation, Tor will go further in details of this kind of technology. I have the pleasure to present to the audience Piet Opstaele, sorry for the pronunciation, coming from the port of Antwerp. Is the leader of the innovation in the port of Antwerp. Another panelist is Isabelle Ryckbost, the Secretary General of ESPO. It's a pleasure to moderate a session where Isabelle is here, because she's a long friend of mine, and so I'm happy to hear her each time this is possible. And for the end, not so far port from the port of Marseille, who I'm working, the port of Barcelona, Carles Mayol, sales manager. Welcome, Carles. Who you have a very long experience in the maritime port industry, and you have several degrees in shipping management and marketing sales. So we have a very good panelist today to talk about the port management. And this is a first presentation. Maybe you can, Elnara, maybe you can run your poll now. I think it's just to give some insight for the presentation. Yeah, Elnara?
Yes, we are running the poll at the moment.
Yeah. I let you present the poll and tell what we are supposed to do and what the audience have to do, please.
Mr. Philip, you have run the poll. I think we can continue with the first presentation. After the first presentation, we will announce the results of the poll.
So results of the poll is after that. Okay, great. So now we can run directly to the first presentation, as Tor has to leave very quickly. So Tor, please, we discussed yesterday about your fantastic technology who can help us to provide some solutions for the Port Authority regarding the sustainability of our business. So please, Tor, it's your turn.
Okie doke. Thank you so much, Philip, and dear all distinguished guests and speakers. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join this interesting forum. Also for Lara and the team for arranging everything so good. I have made a short presentation that I will share with you, and it would be great if you can just, if you have some questions, just you can just put it in the Q&A in the chat, or you can just hold them to I have run through the slides, and then we can do, you can ask them to me directly. My title of what I will talk about is the Ocean Cleanup Volume 2, which is about biofouling. Because as you already mentioned, Philip, and as we all know, it has become more and more important to look at the sustainability of our oceans going forward. And we started, me and my brother Klaus, a company called ECOSubsea now 12 years ago. And that was the goal about making a service to the shipping industry that could make our waters a little bit better and cleaner when we came to this earth than when we left. And basically we had a background from cleaning aquaculture nets from biofouling. And then we got in touch with AP Møller-Mærsk because they were the biggest shipping company in the world, and asked them if they saw a need for environmental friendly service for cleaning of biofouling that was fastened onto the bottom of ships in an environmental friendly way. And they said back then already that in the future there will be a need for a service that can clean a ship without polluting the port, so it captures all the debris, and without damaging the coating on ships, and which is safe, so it's made up by robotic. And over this year, we have had the honor to see that also the focus on sustainability have grown. Even though it's quite interesting to see that back then my professor in international shipping said that he liked the idea of making a solution for the shipping industry, but he said, don't bother about sustainability. It is just going to add extra cost. And it's fantastic now to see. But right now, the world actually, and also because of the COVID, we see that, well, the world is much smaller than we have been thinking about before in many perspectives. We are all on the same planet and we share the same water. I will just start with showing you a film, because then you get right into what is this we're doing, and you can hear a little bit from the Port of Southampton, where we were so lucky to get access, because the Port of Southampton had very strong biosecurity restrictions, and after 2010 they said no to any in-water cleaning happening in the port. But in 2014, after a throughout vetting process, we got access there because of the environmental capacities. And I'll show you a little video clip right now.
It's been likened to a cross between a vacuum cleaner and a lawnmower. Attached to the hull, this machine is stripping off dirt, slowly cleaning an area the size of half a football pitch.
We've developed soft jets, so that's a whole new method where we use very low pressure jets, but we use seawater, and it's only seawater and electricity to drive some cleaning discs that moves over the surface, and they are situated on this submarine.
The waste is pumped back to a collection tank, removing the need for divers or the cost of a dry dock. Keeping them afloat is good for the cargo business and saves money.
We estimate through this we could save over 10% in our fuel cost just by basically cleaning the bottom of the hull, keeping it clean just as you would to basically reduce the friction.
Environmentally, the risk of transferring live organisms around the world is much reduced. The residue collected is also valuable biomass fertilizer that once burnt creates electricity. This waste has been freshly scraped off the hull of this ship. It's then bagged up for processing. 1/2 ton of this muck is enough to power one light bulb for over 5 years. Until now, a vessel of this size might get a spring clean every couple of years. That can now be completed every 6 months.
There are many different rules that apply to different ships and so on, but we do have very high standards here, and we're trying going forwards to make sure they get higher still, because we recognise we have an impact on the city locally, and we're trying to reduce that impact going forwards.
If every ship passing through the port were cleaned in this way, it would help power around 100 Southampton homes a year. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today.
Yes, and when we started the company, we saw that the reason for having a clean ship was actually performance, because you save fuel. But what we see now is, and when we're looking in binocular and we see ahead, we see that the main problem probably going to face ports is species extinctions, and that's also going to affect the shipping industry. And in 1st of May 2019, the UN found that 1 million out of 8 million species in the world, important chains in our food and in our waste deterioration, don't have the fundament to survive. And one of the main reasons for these species getting extinct, that is because we introduce new species into sensitive areas. And before, we thought that it was ballast water that was the main cause for these introductions of species. But recent studies that has come over the years show that, for example, in New Zealand, just 3% of introduced species came through ballast tanks, while 69% or more actually were species traveling on the fouling on ships. And we see now we are participant in the Glow Fouling project that we work together with the IMO. And we see now that internationally, this is getting more and more the focus. The current technologies for hull cleaning has traditionally been divers, which has been using handheld equipment, but also robots that has partial capture. And this has then caused massive pollutions in ports, both of heavy metal from the coating, and not the least that you increase a hub for spread of alien invasive species in the port where this is permitted, because then you increase the problem. When you look at the regulatory side, we are actually building up a catch-22. So in one part of the world, or in many parts of the world, many ports are now closing for traditional in-water cleaning or cleaning with partial collection or no collection. And on the other side of the world, we see countries like New Zealand, and we see countries like Australia and California that actually says you have to show what you're doing with your biofouling in order to get access to your ports. And if this is going to continue, you will have more and more ports that close for the opportunity to get the ship clean, and more ports that says you cannot come in with a dirty ship. And this is the way where we hope to make a difference. You also have robotic solutions that have come over the years with the environmental flag, but in reality, when it comes to the port, it turns out that it's been polluting in the port. And we've seen robotic solution being banned in Southampton and actually in Antwerp as well, Zeebrugge, Portsmouth and Rotterdam of this reason. When it comes to regulations, we see that there needs to be something to ease out this situation. The rig that we have, as you saw, is actually put on a trailer to be extremely mobile. It is all-in-one model, so it's basically a compact trailer of 18 meters where you have a filtration process system, a cockpit, a robot, and a pump. And when it comes into port, we put a remote-operated vehicle, the robot, and it goes back and forth under the ship and continuously send all the waste up to shore for processing. And the goal is that the ship should be served while they're doing cargo operation in order not to lose any time. As I mentioned briefly in the film, we've developed something called soft jets. And basically, instead of shooting like you would with a high pressure on the car directly onto a surface, the jets are shot in parallel with the coating. So therefore, you can clean with much lower pressures and you don't take off and damage the antifouling coating. And therefore also what you take off is organic material that you can use in ingredients. For example, in biogas production like we do in Southampton. When it comes to filtration, we have sedimentation process, a biofouling removal process, where we typically take off 50 to 1,000 kilo of dried waste, as you saw in the film. Then we have 20 micron filtration, and then we have UV treatment, which is to kill if there is alien invasive species that is still in the water, and then the water is discharged to the sea again. So it's basically actually being filtrated. The water that comes back is more clean than what came into the process. And we also put on optional micro filtration, and that is in the case like we saw with Queen Elizabeth last summer, where they had coating that was totally compromised, and thereby we could actually clean this, and you can take out even the micro particles in the process. We have focused on not only showing in a one-time test that this is eco-friendly, as we have seen over the years, as I mentioned, that there will come eco-friendly solutions. So one of the things we did, since we are standing on the quayside, was that we said, well, let's measure the sediment for copper and zinc, which is the main components in both coatings, exactly in the areas where we have been invested. I'm sorry, Philip? Yeah, I'll just continue. And what turns out was that in the areas where the first vessels had been cleaned, it was actually less copper content and zinc in the water. And this has we done continuously with the port. And we don't see this as a technology that you put in, but we've rather said...
Moi, je vais échanger avec lui, ok. Je vais l'appeler.
We rather need to collaborate, the ship owners,
ouais, mais il faut faire le contact.
And the technology providers.
Ouais, il va falloir que... Bah, je ne comprenais pas trop ce que je pouvais dire, moi. Ok, je vais l'appeler.
Philip, I think you have... can you
ouais,
please...
parce que je voulais plus d'explications, si tu avais plus à me dire.
Philip, could you please mute the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Yes, that would be good. Yeah, so we did try to show that the long-term sampling also is crucial, not only that one-time water sample. And we showed that the sediment level of copper and zinc actually had decreased in the area where cleaning had happened. And since then, we've done this in a yearly, regular, or half, and done dozens or many thousands of water sample, and it turns out that the long-term effect is actually improving the sediment quality in the port. What we developed, as I mentioned, is a collaboration with the port, where we developed the biofouling monitoring port record book. And this is actually a tool where we have a monthly reporting to the port now of Antwerp and Southampton, and where we are, where you show the exact ships that you have been cleaning, the total amount of biofouling that is collected, and then you have also sharing the receipts of the waste that has been taken off. And just to wrap it all up, we believe that the ocean cleanup, which has been highly focused when it comes to plastic, happened in the Great Pacific, is a fantastic initiative. But we believe that on the international agenda, and very crucial, will be the biofouling ocean cleanup that we will need to do in order to sustain our ocean and ensure that species are not spread over the oceans. And I believe that those who will have most gain from that actually will be the ports. In the UK, we saw the House of Commons found that it costed the UK £1.8 billion a year, a new introduced species. And they've said we need to do something about it. And who are we in the UK? Well, that is actually the coast. And who is the coast? Well, that is the port. And we see that whilst alien invasive species can be managed on a ship with ballast system, and that makes sense. We see that, but a ship just needs to be cleaned 1 to 2 a year. So it makes sense actually to have it in the port. So far, we've been cleaning 600 ships for amongst Carnival and Maersk and Royal Caribbean. We have collected about 60,000 kilos of biofouling. The vessels have saved approximately 3 million tons of CO2 to date. That is as much as all Norwegian annual emissions from aviation. Our port champions, we have been collaborating, and we started in the port of Oslo, Gothenburg, and Copenhagen. And now we are also operational in Southampton, Antwerp, Zeebrugge, Rotterdam, Bergen, and Amsterdam, and Portsmouth International Port. And our big message is that we want to participate in making this ball a little bit greener when we're leaving than when we came. but we see that that is only done by collaboration, and we see that who is the most important parties here. Of course, it is the ship owner who can say the fuel and say the CO2, but just as important, we see the facilitator for environmental friendly waters, and that actually becomes the port. So our big invitation is that we want to collaborate with more ports. We see that if we can clean 10,000 vessels a year, which is ambitious, then it would be 1 million tons of biofouling collected a year and 50 million tons of CO2 saved. And that is actually the total annual emissions from the whole of Norway. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to hear if you would have any questions. Thank you.
Many thanks, Tor, for this very interesting presentation. It's always interesting to see this kind of new technology, which could reduce the environmental impact of the maritime transport for sure. It is one of the main challenges that we as port authorities have to address the sustainability in the port sector. You know, I'm as well a general secretary of the Med-Port Association. It's an association gathering the managing bodies of the main ports in Med, and I think we will be very interesting to know more about your technology. So I would like to keep in touch with you, Tor, because we like this kind of innovative solution in Med, and so it will be interesting to discuss with you later. As agreed with the organization, we will have the Q&A session after, but as you have to leave, if I see one question here, maybe you can make a short answer. For example, Stefan Ike asks you, is it possible to clean also the hull bottom or only the hull sides? This is a question for you, Tor.
Thank you so much. I'll just run through them then, Philip. And this is a very good question. And normally we clean the whole ship, but we see that 95% of the ships that we clean is just the vertical sides. But it's very correctly pointed out by Stefan that but if a ship has been idle, then you also have fouling on the bottom, and then the robot goes under and clean that. And he also follows up with a question here of how much time we need. To give a ballpark figure, this of course depends very much on the type of biofouling and so on, but it's on average for a 200-meter ro-ro, which is 7 meters deep, we use 9 hours. And then, I think that was the second. And then the third point is, in your opinion, is there a matter of sustainability of human capital in ports? I'm not sure if that was directed to me.
I think it's a general question. Huh?
Yeah.
It's a general. I have a question for you. Is it possible to keep the operations on the ships during the cleaning?
Yes, and this is actually the demonstration that we are having here in the port of Mongstad is actually ongoing now, where we have LNG powered ship, which is now discharging diesel. So this is actually normally a high HSEQ area, but still it is possible. And also for all the cruise companies, this is where there is a lot of logistics. We typically put in the trailer before or right after the ship has arrived, and then all the operations are ongoing around. So it is the whole purpose is to try not to interfere with the vessel's cargo into operation or the port's operation. And you also see added benefits like we see here in the port of Bergen, where they have also cold ironing. So we actually can make the machine run on port electricity as well, making it even. So we see that the opportunity here is, of course, EcoSubsea can do something alone. But we see when we collaborate with the ports who can actually facilitate for the ships, that is when you get much more out of it for all parties.
Tor, if you have a couple of minutes in front of you, just another question coming from, I guess, a Romanian auditor, Laurențiu George. Any assistance needed from the ship side workforce?
No, not. It's not interfering. So even now with the COVID, we have digital protocols. So we don't need to, in a way, to physically meet the vessel. We do everything digitally. And as I mentioned, the whole point is that we shouldn't interfere with anything. Sea chest and overboard cleaning is a good question. We don't do the propeller, the niche areas, the sea chest. We go over the sea chests, and in a way you get a clean right over, but it's not an instrument that goes into the sea chest, if you understand what I mean.
Tor, I will take the last question for you. After that, we let you to go to your demonstration, and we let as well the other panelists to make their presentation. The last question is, what are the cost of saving potentials for ship owners, operators, compared to usual classical hull cleanings or dry dock session? That is the question.
Yeah, you could say for one of the leading ro-ro companies in the world that we've been working for, before they were doing infrequent in-water cleaning. And basically what we do is that we monitor the fouling development on their ship. And compared to traditional just cleaning here and there and with methods that damage the coating, they say in this film, as you see, we expect at least 10% savings on a fuel bill. And that is because you don't damage the coating. Yes, and that is because you don't damage the coating, so the vessel doesn't foul fast again, and naturally because you can do it when you need to. So some ships don't need to be cleaned in 3 years, but actually we cleaned Queen Mary the second 8 times last year. So some vessels need to do it very frequently, and that is the whole point. You can do condition-based maintenance when you need to, and thereby keep the risk for the port low, because you have little fouling coming into the port, little alien invasive species, and you can say to the ship owner that when you've been here and done your cargo operation, by the way, you should expect at least 10% savings on the fuel bill.
Thank you, Tor. Thank you, Tor. I don't know if I lose the connection. Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay. So, Tor, many thanks again. I think you will be available for another question, and you put on your presentation your detailed contact. So I guess that you will be happy to answer to the question and to continue pursue the discussion with some auditors after this webinar. Thank you again, Tor, and see you maybe soon in the south of Europe.
Fantastic. Many thanks, Philippe, for the opportunity. And yeah, please feel free to get in touch. We are looking much forward now.
We will keep in touch for sure. We will talk about innovative solutions. So the transition is very easy to let Piet Opstaele from the port of Antwerp to take the mic and to make his presentation. Piet is one of the drivers of the digital transition. Digitalization is another big challenge that we have to address as a port authorities, and certainly one of the challenge that it could allow us or give us the possibility to outcope from the crisis. So Piet, the floor is yours. Thank you again to be here.
Thank you, Philippe. Also, good afternoon to all dear guests joining this webinar. As Philippe mentioned, you're doing a lot on innovation and sustainable transition in the Port of Antwerp. I would be very pleased to share that in detail with you on next occasion. But today, in these exceptional times, the aim is to focus how ports are behaving in times of COVID-19. So maybe just 2 words on the Port of Antwerp for the people who don't know that. It's a more than 500-year-old port, second largest in Europe. We have a big chemical cluster here. It's situated about 80 kilometers inland, and that's not really an inland port. It's still a seaport, but we have in that way a closer approach to our customer base in mainland Europe. Just a few figures. It's an area, it's 120 square kilometers, about 60,000 people come every day into the port, so it's giving some challenges on mobility. And there are about 1,000 companies active on the port platform. You have a top 30 of that, and then a long tail of smaller SMEs. Good. COVID-19, I think for all of you, I hope your family life and personal life was not too heavy impacted, but anyhow, it were exciting times with a lot of disruption and change in the last 3-4 months. And that's not finalized yet. If we look to a broader context as being innovation lead, of course, we look to opportunities, despite sometimes the personal, economic and social misery, which was caused by COVID. We see also some opportunities coming up. I think technology, we have history is speeding up in times of crisis. So we see there a fast development and take-up of new technologies and data. Some new concepts came in, like a contactless supply chain. Nobody heard about that 3 months ago, but now that will be for sure the concept which will be there for the coming years. We have new content creation, new platforms have been set up both on education level or on a professional level. I think the fact that we today keep this webinar is there the proof of. Also approaching our customers, we are doing that and we'll do that in the future in new ways. More direct, I think, maybe more empathic, also keeping the conditions in mind. And of course, on strategy planning and market segmentation and engagement, also there a lot has been changed. So I think a lot of companies are looking how they can become more resilient to future crises, because the next crisis will come anyhow. The only question is when. Personally, I believe 2 big trends will accelerate. First, automation, and that will not be further automation of mechanics, which for instance happened in container terminals, but introducing there more intelligence, artificial intelligence, where technology is becoming more and more an assistant to the human. I think we will see a faster development of that in the coming 1 to 5 years. And of course, digitalization, having new tools, things like Zoom, but also working from home, which will have a big impact on mobility, will have a big impact on public transport. We get in a few weeks' time a complete new context on that. Okay, so if we look what happened in the port of Antwerp itself, we remained fully operational, and it was also important to guarantee the supply chain, mainly if you look to food and pharma, for instance. Belgium is an important pharma production country, so it was important to keep these things running. All our bridges and infrastructure and tugboats and so on, we keep on going there, so that's good news. A few things we did was creating backup solutions, like our central traffic management center that was located north of the port, but we created 2 backup solutions to have risk mitigation here and ensure the social distancing rules. If we look to execution of our strategic priorities and strategic projects, what will, and I think that's a quite open slide here, internal information, but no problem to share it with you. It's rather limited. We see a main impact of about 9 projects out of the 35 which are taken in consideration. A total 40, okay. So we see some timing shifting there, and mainly some European subsidized and other projects, or in question mark, and there's some delay on that. Main impact we see is an infrastructure project because several construction companies were in lockdown for several weeks, for several months, and of course you have the impact of the social distancing rules in the efficiency of working. And of course, that's no surprise, the digital transformation in communication and project follow-up. That was, for a lot of people, a fast learning track, but all in all, I think it went quite smooth. One of the things, and sometimes you see also innovation, I think the previous speaker will fully agree with that, but innovation or the success of innovation is for 40% depending on the right timing. And we had a project running since last year with the wearables, smart wearables, to increase the safety or to get in when people, or to get fall detection, or if somebody gets falls out of a boat, so that there is a warning given. That project was running together with the technology company here in Antwerp, Rombit. But then COVID was coming up, and they said, yeah, maybe we should extend our functionality with the social distancing rule, which is employed in Belgium of 1.5 meters, I think, in most other countries in Europe. So they developed that quite fast, and it was brought to the public and to the press, and it got a huge attention. I think it was on CNBC, on New York Times, and BBC, and so on. Also, a few weeks ago, the King of Belgium visited the port, and that wearable was presented to him. The second thing is we have a few truck parkings, large truck parkings, 200-300 trucks in the port. You know, most of these truckers or people from Southeast Europe, which not always speak and understand the local language or even English. So for them, the social distancing rules, which were active here in Belgium, were not always very clear. So we used a drone for that to get just vision to monitor how is that happening. Should we provide more information? Should we bring in other people to clarify the social distancing rules? A nice one is the Takeup. We are a 1,500 people organization, and before COVID, about 80 to 100 people were working from home on regular times. We see there in Belgium there was a lockdown on the 16th of March, and there in a few days we see an increase to 700 people and even up to 750 people later on. Of people working from home. So that's kind of new normal, and it was a very fast learning track, but it went quite smooth. And I think in the beginning people had to get used to MS Teams and Zoom and other tools, but actually we are 3 months later now, and that's working. That's seen as being normal. Just to give you, that were some examples and some actions we have been taken in the last months. Okay, what will the future bring? Very hard to predict, and nobody knows. So it's very much depending when a vaccine will be ready and so on. But we see 3 big trends happening. It's everything about distance learning, virtual meeting, teleworking. That will be there, that will stay there, with all positive impacts, for instance, on mobility. Driving here, I'm a quite long commuter. There are no traffic jams anymore around Antwerp. 6 months ago, it was in the top 5 in Europe of most congested areas. Robotization, digitalization, and automation. I think we will see there a further acceleration on that. Companies will look how they can further automate certain processes, helping people, in assisting people in doing their job. And the third one, a lot of question marks on that. There's a re-engineering of the supply chain. Maybe a few words on that. Also there we see some disruptions. It's a high dependency on China. I think with all medical material which has to come from China, I think a lot of countries were suffering and had problems in having continuous supply chain on that. So that will change for sure. Export restrictions, so it was very much dependent per country. And overall a distortion in transport, border crossings which were blocked and so. So what will be the supply chain of the future? We see a few orientations which will happening. It will be more customer-centric. So e-commerce, for instance, will further boom. Transparency will be crucial. So sharing data and making that transparent over the supply chain, you see currently an acceleration happening in that because cargo owners, they would like to know where their cargo is in the supply chain. So a big demand on that. Okay, what will happen with further globalization? It's not an easy one. Also with the following topic, how strong nearshoring, multi-sourcing will be implemented in the coming years. So let's say that over the 4 lines, we are looking to what the further development also in the supply chain and the development of the port will be in the coming years. Just to share as last topic, Port of Antwerp is part of Chainport, and Chainport is an alliance of 10, 12 larger deep sea container ports in the world, Singapore and Busan, Hamburg, Rotterdam, Antwerp, Barcelona is there, Los Angeles, Montreal. So there are a few working groups there on innovation and digital transformation and cybersecurity. And it's the main target is to share knowledge and experience in order to connect to each other. So also there in the last months, we had several discussions. What's the impact, the sharing best practices in COVID-19 actions? I give you a short overview. I will not show it too long as it being quite confidential information. But anyhow, the conclusions there, you can, 4 main conclusions came out of that discussion. Sustainable transition is key. Everybody sees that the ports which are energy intensive, we need to take action now. And digitalization and innovation will be main drivers for that. Otherwise, we will never reach the transformation to a low carbon economy. Shift to social license to operate. Ports or large areas which have impact on their environment, positive and looking to labor and GDP impact and so on. Sometimes less positive, looking to space and emissions. But it will be very important in the future to focus also on that social license to operate. What's the social responsibility of a port? I think the third very important one is connect assets. Data, very important, I mentioned already, but also pipelines, windmill networks, and so to connect regions. Like if we look here in Northwest Europe, I think we should work closer together there. And value change. Linking up to other industries, and of course also the impact of e-commerce. And last but not least is the human factor, very important. So working out cultural change and into bringing in also new skills, because the labor market will be changing faster than ever in the coming 5 years. So educate people with new digital skills will be crucial. Please, that was my presentation. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Many thanks for your presentation. I saw that many questions arrive, and we decided to keep this for the end of the session. I keep in mind from your presentation 2 things very important that we have to address as a port authorities. The first one is how to manage between the fact that we need to be to remain open for the trade of the strategic goods, and at the same time we we have to protect the port workers. We have to protect and to guarantee the safety, the security, and the health of all the people who are concerned by the port activities. So one of the principal means to do that, it was the digital technology, and you perfectly illustrate in your presentation the importance of the digitalization in the ports. And the second point I keep in mind from your presentation is maybe the new way to think the globalization, and to reconsider maybe the question of the nearshoring. Many carriers have started to think about that before the COVID-19 crisis, but now it seems to be again more relevant. So maybe we will discuss about that at the end of the presentation. I have a message from the organization, and they asked me to present the results of the poll just before the presentation of Isabelle Ryckbost from ESPO. This is the presentation of the result. Which proposal should be implemented to fight the COVID-19 in maritime sectors? Piet, you convince everybody.
Before the presentation.
Investment in digitalization. You have a great future in front of you. So a little bit less, 50% of the auditors want to see more investment in digitalization. For sure. I remember, you know, in the Medports Association, we organized since the beginning of the crisis a Medport coffee on weekly, once by week since April or something like that. And each time we discuss about how to implement in the best way and as fast as possible digital technology in all ports. So it's a very, very key question now in the management of the ports. Yeah, the second position in more investment is safety, health and security in second position, 26%, and after you can see investment in general speaking. Okay, interesting. Maybe Isabelle, you can use some results, some indication for your presentation. Isabelle, from Antwerp to Brussels, there is a little job. And so now I want to let you make your presentation. Isabelle Ryckbost is General Secretary of the European Seaport Organization since years now. I don't remember when, but it's always a pleasure to work with you, Isabelle. And Isabelle is defend and promote the interest of the port in Europe and around the world, and she does this perfectly. Isabelle, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Philippe, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Philippe, and also for the organizers to setting up this webinar. And yeah, it's challenging days, and yeah, it's good also to see a lot of known faces among the speakers, and I hope that I very much believe in the virtual world and digitalization and home working, but I think to have real meetings is still also needed in the future. But this being said, yeah, since the beginning of this crisis, we have been very active, and I mean very active because ports have been very involved. The title of this webinar is Port Management, and in fact, I would like to say ports are managing, and this is, I think, and it all has been conveyed also by Piet. Ports have really been managing this crisis, have shown very much their critical role. Their operational role has been proven to really be resilient. I have seen contingency plans working very well. Ports remained open also in the countries that were most affected by the COVID. So I think this is a very important message. Also, not that it worked, but also that because, you know, we are a policy organization, so we as you said, Philippe, we try to defend the interests of the ports towards the decision makers. And I remember that just before the lockdown, I had talks with the Commission, and I was at the last conference before the lockdown, and they were saying, but you know, this COVID and so on, it's something for the airlines and for the airports, it's very important, but for you it doesn't matter so much. And the health crisis then, and then 1 week after that, they called us on the weekend to say like, yeah, but now we realize ports are really critical for the access and the supply of the goods and essential goods to the population and so on. Are your ports ready for that and so on? So they realized that these ports have critical role, and that in itself, I think it's I would say, as ports and also as maritime supply chain, it's something we should use, and we should also convey in our messages when we talk about investments, when we talk about ports as strategic assets and so on, that they need to consider this port seriously. If we also look at the crisis, I think there are 2 or 3 important features. It's that unprecedented, okay, we always say that, but what is, I think, very important also from a port's perspective, it's that a global crisis, but it's non-synchronized. So, I mean, we had the crisis in China, which already impacted on European ports first. So that ports, Chinese, the westbound not coming in, let's say. So that was already a first disruption, that even at some point, some industries in Europe could not, had to stop because the spare parts were not coming in. So that is, and we will now have the crisis in South America, in Africa maybe, but certainly now in South America. So I think as long as there will be the health peak somewhere in the world, there will be a kind of disruption of the global trade. And this is because trade is so fragmented. And so that is, I think, an important thing to consider. The other thing is that it's a health crisis, and for Europe, the big impact there is that health policy are national policies with important budgets, and also very close to the population, so there is a lot of sovereignty, and we are with supply chains, with ports, with internal market, and Europe being an open market, so you have really a tension field there. You have every country who is taking certain measures and who can do it, because health is in European law one of the reasons to step out the internal market, to close your borders and so on. So that has been and is still nowadays a tension field, because we had then the opening or partially opening, or at least prioritization of some trade lanes, the green lanes. But for instance, if we look at the internal borders now for passengers, for like ferries and so on, every member state is still choosing what they want to open at which point and with which country. So also for ports, for ferry lines and so on, you are depending on that. And so health remains an important thing. What we also saw linked to that is that we have seen an increased economic nationalism, export bans in the world, people protecting their productions, not only for medical products, but also for even for some fruit or some vegetables, grains. We have seen some and are seeing some export bans. So then to say what at European level, the Commission is now very much talking about recovery and so on, but at the same time, they are planning a new transport strategy for the next 10 years, let's say. These talks should start very soon, and the Commission still has the aim to have a transport strategy by the end of the year. End of April, we have been making a statement as European Seaports Organization to say, like, hold on, please do it in 2 steps, and first settle the dust, measure the damage, see where we end coming out of the peak of this crisis before setting long-term goals and a long-term policy, because we do not know. Everyone is saying we are going into a new normal, nothing will be the same. But what will be this new normal? And so we believe that a lot more reflection is needed to make long-term objectives, long-term policy, in order to avoid to decide the wrong things. In the short term, we think, of course, we have to look into support measures, this restoration of the internal market, also in the health measures, the preventive measures in the coexistence with the virus, let's say. So these are things that need to be done in the short term, but in the longer term, we will have to look into real rethink. And I think Piet has flagged up some issues. This reflection, let's say, in ESPO still needs to be developed, and we really would like to take our time, because we also know that, and I think Piet can confirm that in ports in Q1, the impact was not so big, depending, of course, of which area we are talking, but we believe that the consequences and the visibility of the economic impact of this crisis will only appear in Q2, Q3, and maybe even hopefully not, but longer, because the health crisis is also creating an unprecedented economic crisis. So we have to take our time. But then if we look into long-term policy, what is important is there are some issues. The first one is resilience. Resilience will become really a topic that comes to the forefront, and it's both the resilience of the supply chains and the critical role of ports. And I think we have proven it's okay, but maybe there are also things that can be strengthened. But then it's also the resilience of the internal market, so restore this connectivity and see that even if you have such a crisis, try to strengthen the principles of the internal market so that the goods can flow, that the links to the hinterland can be there, and so on. And then it's also resilience of Europe. That is a new concept that is being discussed at the EU level, to say we should also be more responsible for, see that we have strategic productions, maybe strategic reserves in place for certain products, essential products, and there may be also ports could play a role. It's also, and that brings me to the trade issue, and it was flagged up by Piet. The crisis has shown that we are very dependent on one factory, let's say, or one country in the world who is the big producers of many products, but that also in general we might, for some raw materials and so on, be really relying on some producers, on some countries. And in such a crisis, if then you have a lockdown in these countries, this can really stop the whole economy or the economy in your area. So that has been a reality. So will this lead to deglobalization? I do not think so, but I think it can lead, of course, to a kind of diversification of production sites, so that companies, also even fashion companies and so on, the Zaras of this world, that they will try to look at having more diversification, so being more resilient. That I think is important. And so you will also have some maybe a regionalization, and that could also impact the maritime transport in for us, for Europe. Motorways of the sea between member states could become more important, but also maybe motorways of the sea between Europe and some neighboring countries. So this could be maybe an interesting thing to look at. Another thing, digitalization. It has been mentioned by Piet, so I won't go into the details. So far, we always said digitalization is a tool for efficiency, sustainability, transparency. And now we see that digitalization has been really a tool in this contactless transport. So in fact, a tool for containing the virus. So that is an interesting asset. It has accelerated very much the digitalization. It's a good lesson because at sudden we are doing some things paperless and so on, and now we have to see that we can embrace it, and that this continues, that the people who now accept paperless are also doing that once the crisis is over, and that we continue in this space. What I think and what will have to be looked at is the resilience of the whole digital side. We now rely more than ever on digital solutions, and we depend on systems, on platforms, and so on. So we will have to see that these systems are robust, and that we can that we do not create another cybersecurity or another crisis. So this we will have to put efforts in that. Then another thing is TEN-T policy and transport infrastructure needs. Is there an impact there? The throughputs will go down in many ports. Does that lead to other projects? I'm not sure. What is clear is that everything what is greening, everything what is making your port state-of-the-art, greening, digital, and so on, the cost of that and the importance of these investments will remain. So this is very important because maybe your incomes will go down, but your investments will remain as important as before. So this will squeeze a bit your financial viability. So, and that related then to our critical role, we hope we can count there on EU support. Green Deal, climate is there, it's also a global crisis, and it has been a bit put aside in a way because of all the COVID news, but climate remains an issue more than ever. What will be important, and I think because we will now have the two things, and we will have to keep the ambitions of the Green Deal, is that we really must see that there is no money to waste. So we will have to see that all the policy measures, all the investments, that they are very effective, so that we look into them and that we can go for a green recovery, but use the money in the right way. And there we depend on the policymakers. They have to make a framework that is maybe not a one size fits all, but see that the greening in the ports, it's at the level at the port, also in a coalition, let's say, with their users, the shipping lines, energy providers, and so on. I think the last thing and the big thing as well is crews and passengers. They have been very much hit by this crisis. They had to stop in the many, of course, the cruise, but then also many ferry lines were deeply and are still deeply affected. It's also a sector that will only be able to restart, or can only restart, at least for the moment, by taking additional measures, additional investments. Also there, question mark, 1.5 meters, social distancing, and so on. Is this something for the short run, for some months, or is this something substantial, something structural that will have to be changed? And do we need to rethink passenger terminals and so on in the future? This, I think, is a very important issue to tackle. We are coming from before the crisis. Ports, and Carles will probably say something, or maybe say something about that. We were tackled, ports like Barcelona and whatever, with big issues around over-tourism, sustainability of cruise. I think there might be now for certain months at least a kind of tourism phobia. So, I mean, a deep crisis there. So the debate is completely changing. And probably the way forward is to combine the good things from good solutions, but also look at revamping the sector. So that, I would say, it is not in a nutshell. I've taken too much time, I think, but thanks.
Merci beaucoup, Isabelle. Thank you very much. When you listen to Isabelle, you understand why we are so well defended at the European level. And so it's always a pleasure to hear you, Isabelle, and to see your passion to defend the port authorities. Thanks for this. The time is running, so I jump immediately towards Carles for a presentation from the port of Barcelona. As I said before, it's not so far from where I am in Marseille, maybe 400 kilometers. We are neighbor. Yeah. Just to say one word about Isabelle's presentation, I keep in mind the question of the competencies and the skills and the quality and the need of higher level of qualification of the human resources, because of we will have many changes in the port authorities management in the coming months and years, and I think that we will have big needs of trainings for increase the level of competencies of inside the port authority as well. I think it could be one question, so human resources. I saw some question in the chat on this, so we maybe talk about that after the presentation of Carles. Carles, buenos días, and peut-être you can start your presentation now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, sorry, because I leave just for a while. I had some problems. You know, the digitalization is there, but from time to time happens that there is ads, and you know, I'm sorry because I missed part of Isabelle's presentation, and I will show you right now my presentation. Thank you very much for sure for the invitation to VS Group and the Mediterranean Shipping Summit. Thank you, Jon, for la présentation. Thank you very much indeed. So I will try to show you some thoughts coming from Port Barcelona, the Port Authority. And well, I don't know if you can see the presentation. Yeah, I mean, it's there. Yes, it's there. Good. So in such a way, when we think about the title of this webinar, the COVID-19 impact on ports management today, to tell you through, many questions arise, and we don't have yet the answer to many of them. We are fully familiar or quite comfortable with the Piet presentations. We have some similar milestones in that sense, and the eruption of this crisis has unexpectedly broken. Okay, and the context in which we have been moving until right now is completely different, and it forces us as a port to rethink and to redefine the expectations in short and long terms. Okay, this paradigm shift is this the slide is trying to reflect what the break it represents in everything that could expect ultimately right now. I'm showing you right now the figures of the Port of Barcelona last year in terms of infrastructure, traffic, the economic impact for the port itself, for the Port Authority, and in the surrounding economy. To tell you through, we still don't have idea of what will be the scope of the crisis, as commented before, because we don't know exactly where the bottom line is. Before the presentations in our chat, we explained that we don't know exactly if we are at the bottom of this line, but in any case, as soon as we get the medical solutions, it means medical treatments, successful medical treatments or vaccines that work and so on, we can say that we will back to the previous life. This is a reality. And then this is thanks to this famous virus that is impacting us. Okay, let me joke just for a while. Okay, everybody wants to know what will happen after COVID-19. This is a really key issue for all of us, but we know that predicting the future, as commented by Piet, is a very risky business. So if we look backwards and the past, and we see the latest revolutions that happen in the world, probably very few people were able to predict. So imagine when the Toyota reinvented the supply chain in the 60s, nobody imagined that a country like Japan that had just lost the Second World War could it. So or even in the 70s when that 20 years later, the China could become the factory of the world, or the same in 2018 that very few predict in such a way. So it's very, very risky, and even for the current health crisis. So in terms of the globalization impact, one of the main things that this crisis has shown us is that this kind of disruptions are here to stay. So we have to be familiar from the time being or for the future that this is something that will from time to time could be repeated, and we are going to see these disruptions more frequently than before, because you know that this world is pretty interconnected and it's more easy to spread out these kind of problems or virus and so on. And well, we must to be ready these kind of disruptions. We suffered last year, 2 years ago, sorry, a cyber attack. We fixed it, okay? And health problems like right now, or even climate change that we mentioned in the very beginning presentation. And I mean, this is something that could be more frequent. And I mean that many people in the Western world, especially in the Western culture, believe that this crisis could affect the reduction in the globalization process. We as a Port of Barcelona, we think that globalization is a process that has spread over 5 centuries, has survived cataclysms worse than this one. Imagine the 2 world wars, the Spanish flu, other impacts, and this current economic and financial and social interconnection has been unstoppable till right now. And for me, or for the Port of Barcelona, it's quite hard to believe that this crisis, that are smaller as far as we know than the previous one, should stop this process of the financial and economic disruption. In terms of the indirect impact of the COVID, sorry, there is something that I have to, okay. Are you there? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood, because from time to time, I thought I lose something.
We follow you.
Perfect. I don't know if my presentation is okay, it's working. Yes, for sure. Okay, in any case, then what can we expect after COVID-19? But before to answer the question, but to know it, we have first to know what was happening before. So to show where we were before this crisis, on the slide, we include some of the global trends that we, as a Port of Barcelona, we are considering to prepare our strategic plan 2021-2025, okay? And we are with some mega trend groups gathering some or collecting some insights from the different perspectives. And let me underline some of the most relevant ones. In terms of environmental and energy issue, for sure, more sustainable energy mix and increase of electric mobility will be a reality. From the societal and consumption behaviors, for sure, the local for local, the servitization patterns will acquire additional presence. From the macroeconomics and geopolitics, we strongly think that the strong growth of emerging markets and the slow growth of the advanced economies will be a reality, something that in the past we anticipate, okay? Evolution of the supply chain, global disruptions, or other mega trends like cyber attacks, as I told you before, the value chains digitalization, as commented by Piet, or even additional virus that could affect us in the future. So from the maritime and ports perspective, for sure, there is some trends that are here to set, like for instance, the increase of the ship size, the shipping sector concentration, even the vertical integration from specific carriers. But now we think that the scenario has completely changed and big questions arise in how could COVID impact in our businesses? And again, the accurate answer from our point of view as a Port of Barcelona that we don't know yet. It's quite risky business, as commented before. This crisis will probably speed up some of the main trends existing before, we commented before. If we look to the main drivers of the maritime trade for the last 30 years, basically thinking about this, the Mediterranean or European trades, we can find 4 main drivers that are already showing some decline before the COVID-19. And this situation probably will accelerate. An increase in containerization has been pretty stable by 12% of the maritime traffic during last 10 years. Liberalizations thanks to the transport production to ocean countries. We have also seen some decline since 2007. This is something that exists before. The growth of liquid bulks, the oil and refined products, and also the growth of the chemicals and automotive industry. All this sector has forced to growth in the maritime trade in the region. But before this crisis, we're already showing some signs of decline before the COVID-19 crisis. For sure, Isabelle mentioned before, what about the cruise business or the tourism business? For sure, cruise business and passengers were another sector that we will probably have to treat separately because the impact is quite dramatic. Okay, imagine in a city like Barcelona. And COVID-19 crisis will probably speed up those trends that already exist. And in the past, and as a summary of this slide, we could say that probably we won't see ever an increase in trade, like in containers, Balkans, and so on, that as we had in the last 30 years. Something is changing in such a way. In terms of the new possible scenarios, and with the emergence of this coronavirus, we also face a scenario of a lot of uncertainties. From the health point of view, all ports, as well the whole industry, are taking similar measures to protect the health. So we are showing you some different scenarios in that slide, depending mainly on 2 factors. The level of the impact of the crisis on the industry and the duration of the crisis for itself. Let's say that the greater impact on the industry and the longer duration of the crisis, the worst scenario, okay? On the left side is the best case. There is a quick recovery from the health crisis. Again, imagine that we get the successful treatments, we get the vaccine, no mutations or outbreaks or whatever. In any case, it entails a lost year, but not long-term consequences in tourism industry. On the other hand, if we look up, we see a bigger recession. Imagine panic in tourism, high unemployment, some specific sectors closing the doors, okay? And going to the bottom right-hand side, we will have the worst situation, okay? Imagine non-seasonal, recurring, okay? Imagine that we don't get the useful vaccine, mutations. This is the worst scenario. But in any case, the most forecasts are moving a moderately optimistic scenario. But in any case, we have to be aware that this is kind of all taking different paths. And we, as a port, we think that we are still in it. And as we have said from the very beginning, we don't know exactly where the bottom line is in order to take the real diagnosis in such a way. In terms of container volumes, I'm focusing on what happens all around. And so far, the recovery in Asian ports, as you can see in the screen, has been a different in each case, but in any case, following the V-shaped recovery. And in the case of Europe, you say that a longer duration of confinement, or I prefer to say the house arresting, there are more restrictions on mobility that could affect in terms of social and economic point of view. In the specific point of view of the specific case of Spain, we expect a decrease by 12% in the contribution of tourism, and for sure will impact in our case in an incomplete U recovery shape. By the way, the Spanish Central Bank announced last Monday that in the best scenario, Spain will drop 9% of GDP. So it's hard to explain. Let's put the focus in short terms and after that with the long terms. And below we collect some examples in the short terms impact in the crisis that as a port we will have. Firstly, for sure, a reduction in traffic and therefore in revenue. Reduction that is unevenly affecting different types of traffic. For instance, I'll show you in the very beginning of my presentation what about the performance of the port in 2019? Please note that the current situation in the Port of Barcelona, all overall traffic, the total throughput is a decrease, it's a drop by 17%, 17%. Imagine other kind of sectors like vehicles with factories that have been closed during weeks or even months, or containers, or even in the case of cruise ships. For example, you know that Barcelona is the leading port in the Med with more than 3.5 million passengers per year. And this traffic nowadays has been reduced to zero, to nil. So this is amazing impact in such a way. On the other side, we find other kind of sectors that are moving much better, like some food, bulk, for sure pharmacy and medical products. We have to put an eye in terms of financial quick actions from the public sector in order to help the financial liquidity. This is an important milestone. Probably the unique positive effect is the less congestion, less emissions, and less pollutions we are experimenting nowadays. Connected the link with the Isabelle statement in the previous presentation. And also we have seen now the oil and refined products are now keep on waiting for price increase, with some speculating sectors moving, by the way, huge amount of money. In terms of, or regarding long-term impacts, we could also mention some examples. Look, we think that logistics always follows the industry and consumption, and for us is a key point. As a Port of Barcelona, you know that we are a hinterland activity port with a mainly import and export flows, and thanks to our surrounding economy and industrial activity. So for this reason, our logistics flows are linking to the consumption, and we have to see what happens in each case before we can make the real diagnosis, and which sector have survived, which ones have been increased, or which are facing serious or dramatic problems. And as we said before, some sectors are suffering a dramatic impact. Let me underline again the cruise business. And we as a public body, we have to figure out, or we have to think in how to substitute, for instance, the private investment, but sometimes we have some doubts about the public bodies have enough money to do it. Okay, we as a port, we will do our best. We announced today some specific measures to help not just the logistics community, the entire surrounding economy for sure. Following with the different bullets, energy transition in ports could be or may be slow, or even some expected developments may be stopped as well, as a result of the previous statement. For sure, Piet underlines in the previous presentations, we are looking as well for new, or let's say non-traditional businesses. Again, we as a port, we have to rethink about our role as a ports. For sure, there are some opportunities that always are coming, and we need to adapt ourselves to meet the needs of this reality. For sure, well, I don't put some additional focus on the short sea shipping about the nearshoring, because I mean there is some questions that we can discuss after that, okay? But in any case, let me emphasize that as a port, the strategic drivers from our point of view as a Port of Barcelona, diversification, it's a key issue. We are a diversified port. We have to continue to help our different clusters. Digitalization as a driver for not just to provide infrastructure, to provide service. We are, in the past as a landlord, we were port at large, the ports and in general, infrastructure supplier. Nowadays, we are not just infrastructure, we are a service supplier as well. Resilience, it's very important for the current times, how to adapt for the new business models to meet the needs of the sector and consumption behaviors. And for sure, flexibility, that the clients, the customers are knocking the doors for the ports and the entire supply chains to be more flexible. And for sure, it's the sustainable point of view that I will talk about later on. Well, I will
Carles, excuse me, Carles, if you could accelerate a little bit your presentation, because we are close to the end of the webinar. So
for sure, we are entering in the last 3 slides, okay? I will skip some concepts. The point is that we are in a crisis of this magnitude. We don't know exactly how it could evolve. And when some guys are in the business schools, when some guys explain as the VUCA scenario, I mean, this is the perfect storm. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity is there. And we have to be ready to prepare to provide the proper responses for these possible scenarios. And to conclude, I promise you that I'm concluding in 2 slides. I would like to present some of the strategies that as a port we consider to present in our strategic plan in 2021-2025. And as I said before, we are a hinterland port focusing on the how to strengthen existing companies and encourage the new companies to set up, offering better rail connectivity, a strong supply in the connectivity with our strategic markets. And by playing these cards well, we could have access to the new investment as well as to achieve some sustainable and inclusive economy. Okay, so this is quite important for us. And last but not least, this is the last slide. We could not forget that the great developments that are coming to us, innovation is an important issue. Piet underlines very good. We are completely sharing this strategic idea, and innovation should help the entire logistics chain to improve and become more efficient. Reliance and reliability, this is quite important for our end users. And let me just put some examples that will help for sure. 5G network that in the port we are boosting a lot. We'll launch 2023 a plan in order to improve our connectivity with artificial intelligence models and so on to be more flexible in order to keep and to provide innovation as a key points to achieve the rapid adaptation. Lastly, finally, we must not forget that all of these points have to be achieved looking for a sustainable development model from the economic, social, and environmental point of view. And for our point of view, it's essential to move forward with the electrification of the berths, and why not to plan some generation of renewable energies. That's all. Many thanks for the opportunity. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry for overpass my time. Thank you very much.
It's okay. Thank you very much, Carlos. Very interesting presentation. We see with the presentation of Antwerp and the presentation of Barcelona and what I know from the Port of Marseille and what is it possible to share with Isabelle at the European level, that all the Port Authority have the same conclusion after the COVID-19 crisis, and we have the same learnings, and we are all agree more or less, but we are all agree that to have a good recovery, we need to make new investments in strategic fields like digitalization, decarbonization, ecological transition, etc., etc. So it's interesting to see that we across Europe and across Med, we share the same insight. So it's interesting for that. I know that we during your presentation or just before, we will have a second poll regarding the management of the port. Elnara, you are here. Could you please show the result of the poll before the Q&A session? Yeah. The drivers that could boost the maritime economy. Sustainability. Okay, for 1/3 of the attendees. Very close with the research innovation. It's quite in coherence with the first result, the result of the first poll, where digitalization has been placed at the first rank as well. So sustainability, digitalization, research and innovation. Very interesting result, and confirm what we think in the Port Authority. Maybe we can go directly to the Q&A question and answer session. I don't know how many time we have, and but maybe we can have a couple of questions. We have a very active attendee, Laurentius George, who want to ask to the panel a question about, I see that, automation and digitalization. What will be the impact of automation and digitalization on the number of jobs? Will this lead to a reduced number of working force in the ports? That's the right question. Maybe an answer from Antwerp, Barcelona. Maybe Isabelle, maybe you have some information about the negotiation at the with the unions at the European level. I don't know. I let the panel give some information to Laurentius.
Philippe, I can take that because it's a question coming up every time. And in the first personal statement I would like to make, I prefer to work for a company who is innovative and oriented to the future than a company who is not that, because there are so many examples to be given of large companies who disappear or struggling very hard because they didn't invest into the future. Having said that, we saw already in Antwerp a shift in the profile of people working in the port. So we see that over a period of 5-6 years, there was a transition that 7,000 higher skilled people came in, and indeed some lower skilled people they moved out, which is not good. But anyhow, it's a trend you cannot stop, and we should really invest in training people with new digital skills. And I give one example of the potential, because we always look to the current business, but try to invest in future business. I'll give you one example. Inland shipping, which is in the Low Countries here, in Belgium, Netherlands, an important mode of transportation for Antwerp. 40% of the cargo is transported with inland ships, barges. It's very hard to find any people who are prepared to live on these boats. It's an old fleet. There's a lot of global scaling up happening there. So it's a sector which is on heavy pressure on price competition with trucks and so on. So bringing in a certain level of automation, it should not be fully automated, will create a complete new leverage. You can reduce your cost. You will be more competitive against rail and road. And mainly, you will create new business because we have in Belgium a large network of small rivers and canals, which are not used anymore. 80% of the cargo in Belgium is transported inland over 3 canals. All the rest is not used anymore. So by having cheaper solutions, because technology will bring cheaper solutions, you will be able to build new business, city distribution over water, that will improve your overall mobility. So we should look to that and try to invest in that. And in that way, you will create a lot of new jobs.
Yeah, I fully agree. Just let me add some additional examples. I remember in Barcelona, we suffered the same answer, same question, the same approach, and so on. In 2012, we launched the Hutchinson terminal, that is semi-automated terminal. Okay, in that period of time, there were some rejections, and people was quite reluctant to this new reality. From that period of time till right now, we increase our volumes in container business. So we need additional guys from the stevedore point of view. So on all of these guys are working thanks to the diversification in other businesses and in container as well. So thanks to this optimization, thanks to this efficiency, we catch additional volumes, and thanks to that, we need additional guys involved with a different approach for sure. The guys are working in this particular terminal in the let's say in the office, okay, just to providing the last movement. For sure, are working in the gantry cranes, but for the specific works or needs in the container yard, they are using this, let's say, joystick in order to approach the container to the lorry and so on. So again, from the very beginning could be a challenge for all of us, but in the long-term perspective, it's much better for all of us. I fully agree with Piet with this statement for sure.
Thank you, Carles. Thank you, Piet. I know that Isabelle has to leave soon, and maybe there is a question for you, Isabelle. A very practical question. We talk about digitalization, and you talk about virtual meetings. And we have a question from Ryckbost now. Will you change to virtual meetings with suppliers, partner, other stakeholders much more, or do you prefer on-site meetings? I think you could give an answer, Isabelle, because your work is to make lobby, and lobby is a meeting, always, always, always. So could you tell us about your experience during this period, and how is it possible to work with digital technologies, and especially in your field, the lobbying?
Yeah, very briefly, yeah, I'm not, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask that to, but I think what we have been very happily surprised in the first weeks of the lockdown, that everything worked so well, and that we could instead of stopping, we could all continue from our homes and have a lot of meetings, and certainly on a lot of urgency issues. But for instance, now we have to start discussing things like the long-term strategies for transport and so on with normally if Europe is preparing legislation, they are having stakeholder meetings, but with all member states, with all stakeholders, and this is really not 4 or 5 people together in a virtual meeting, but sometimes 30 people, 50 people, 100 people. And there, I think it's not, it's very difficult to have a full discussion, and also see that you reach out to as organizer. I see it in ESPO as well, but also to catch, to have the opinions and the input from everyone.
Yeah.
There will always be, and you have it in physical meetings as well, and that some people are more defending themselves than others. But I think in all the virtual meetings, this is even more so. So that I think it's important. So I think virtual meetings, the positive thing, we work at the European level, and I think also the ports are doing well, doing that. It's easier for short meetings to quickly reach someone, and that we have seen as well during the last months. But some kind of meetings won't be replaced by a virtual meeting, and it will remain challenging. So I hope that we are not fully replacing the physical meetings.
Thank you, Isabelle. Thank you for your answer. It's very interesting to have your feeling about this question, because digitalization could not solve all the problem as well, and human people need to have a physical meeting as well. So it's important to talk about that. We have another question about connectivity, and especially the interland connectivity. Do you think that the interland connectivity importance will increase due to COVID-19? And in relation with this question, we have some question about the investment in the network infrastructure and the need for good connectivity. The question is maybe for Barcelona. So, Carles, if you have something to say about interland connectivity and, in general speaking, the connectivity of the ports.
Well, for sure it is, but it's not now for us. In our case, we developed this strategy 20, 25 years ago. So we will continue investing to approach our port to every single corner in Spain, south of France, and North African countries, even Italy with short sea shipping. So it's important, but COVID could accelerate for sure. But in our case, we are ahead of time, 20, 25 years ago, just for one reason: in order to provide competitiveness to those guys that are 600 or 900 kilometers away from the port. They should have the same opportunities that the guys that are in the first or second ring of the port. So connectivity provides efficiency, provides competitiveness, and for sure this is a hot topic nowadays for the companies that are exporting and importing. Due to the COVID-19, we have to help them to be more competitive, and I mean that for sure the hinterland connectivity, it will be a must till right now, but maybe more nowadays.
Thank you, Carlos. We have some question about I'm not sure we will have the answer in the panel, but I will ask. For example, we have some question about the measure taken during the COVID, and if this kind of measure, and we are talking about crew and passenger movement, will stay in the future. So the question is, are we going to have new laws and policies that will apply to all the ports around the world regarding the circulation of passengers, regarding the movement of crew? Is there, if the panel have some information for Laurent, you? Do you think that the measure taken during the COVID-19 could stay in the long term?
Well, as far as we know, as a Port of Barcelona, you know that the passengers, specifically in the cruise business, is crucial for us. We are strictly following the instructions coming from the sanitary ministry, Spanish sanitary ministry, so or the health ministry, whatever. And during that period of time, we didn't attend any single cruise business, cruise vessel or passenger vessel, specifically for some cruise change crew or crew leaving and so on. And for sure, we will continue. We will follow strictly the instructions of the sanitary measures coming from the health ministry. And for sure, there are companies rethinking how to accomplish the new reality. It's complex because imagine 300,000 guys inside a cruise boat. It's not easy. So we are working on it for sure. But again, we will continue. We will follow the instructions coming from the health ministry.
Thank you, Carlos. We talk about sustainability of the maritime transport a lot during this webinar, and we will take a last question. It will be about the alternative fuel, and some people ask about the future of LNG, about the future of hydrogen, about the future of OSPS. What is your insight for the audience from Carlos, from Piet?
I can take this one. I think Antwerp is the 5th largest bunkering port in the world. So today we have a lot of fuel going through here. We have LNG available. It's clear, and I think most ports will go in that direction. We go to a multi-fuel port approach. And for us, we believe that hydrogen will be, of course, it will never be a leading energy form on the world scale, but in the shipping industry, for sea-going ships, as far as we can see, there are not many other sustainable solutions except hydrogen, green hydrogen, in particular to have a solution on the longer term. And that's the thing we're investing in also.
From our point of view as well, from Barcelona perspective, we have to be aware of what's going on, what's the evolution of every single solution. It means LNG. We have a plan of LNG we are providing, for instance, to cruise ships during the last 2019. We are keep an eye with the different other solutions. We announced a huge investment for the OPS. It means the coal ironing for the upcoming years. For sure, renewables will be an option. So different kind of solution has to be on the table in order to think which is the best one, offering the different solutions in this transition. At the end of the day, this is a transition. So we don't know exactly which kind of solution will be the winner, but we have to offer the different options to the industry. And the important thing is that every single port, we can do it for itself alone. We have to continue with a common policy, because it not make sense. Imagine that one single port decide to provide a specific solution that it doesn't work for the shipping lines, for the carriers, or for who else. So we have to rethink, we have to be aware of what's going on with the different solutions, and taking solutions all together in order to gather the best possible one.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. If I may add something with my cap of the Port of Marseille. As you know, the Port of Marseille since a long time is a port for all the kind of energies, and you're totally right and fully agree with you. We have to follow all the leads and all the possibility, and so like you, we can provide LNG bunkering now for cruise ship, and we plug the ferries for Corsica Island on the national grid. So now the OSPS works in the Port of Marseille, and I think with the Port of Barcelona, we are working on for the hydrogen solution for the future. So we from the Marseille perspective is important to follow all this kind of solution for the future, and we have to keep in mind as well that the petrol is again and always the main fuel for shipping. So it's important to keep in mind this thing. I think we are close to the end. I turn, if I can say that, towards Elnara. Elnara, dear attendees, thanks for being a part. So I'm sure that the panelists will be very happy to answer to your question if you contact them to develop the discussion after the webinar. It was a real pleasure for me, for the Port of Marseille and for the Medport Association, to moderate this webinar. And I would like to thank you, Carlos from Barcelona, to Piet from Antwerp, Isabelle from Brussels, and Tor somewhere in the North Europe. And thank you very much. Thank you, Elnara. Thank you, your team, for the organization of webinar. I think we were more than 130 during the afternoon, so good attendance, and so it will be a pleasure to make it again in the future. Thank you all. Elnara, you have the last word.
Yeah, we all, on behalf of BS Group, we want to thank all the speakers, for the attendees being part of this discussion. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to welcome you all, and looking forward to meet you in hopefully in offline events soonest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Bye bye. All the best. Best wishes. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.